Hello and welcome to episode 61 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Of course, I am your host, Rick Doherty. On today's show, my good friend Christina from Alaska will be here to discuss her recent visit to Disneyland. Those of you who listen regularly know that I went to Disneyland in August of 2021, but a lot has changed since then, and I wanted to get an on-the-ground update. We'll start the episode, however, with Sarah Says, who will give us an update on Halloween Horror Nights at Universal Orlando Resort. Before that, I wanted to remind everyone that I'm getting ready to walk all 620 miles of the Ireland Way in just a few months. I'm doing this for my own personal, physical, mental, and spiritual reasons, but I'm also raising money and awareness for the nonprofit organization Break the Silence Against Domestic Violence. As I train for this pilgrimage, I have a number of smaller goals on the calendar. Coming up this Sunday, April 3rd, I'll be running the Run Disney Tower of Terror 10-miler with show regular Marissa from Chicago. To help add to my fundraising efforts, we've been trying for the past few weeks to get 100 people to donate $1 per mile in honor of this run. That would be just $10 to break the silence against domestic violence through my link, which is in the description. One thing we're trying to do with this money is provide $1,000 scholarships to survivors of domestic violence and their family members. If we succeed in getting 100 people to donate $10 by Sunday, that will be one scholarship. For some of these survivors, that little bit of extra help may be the difference between completing a degree or training program or not being able to finish it. We're already on our way to that goal thanks to people like Phil and Amanda at Ear to Their Travel. 2 Walt Disney World cast members who are friends of mine, Carmen and Jeff, have donated to the fund. One of my oldest friends from back in Pennsylvania, Danielle, pitched in for the cause. Please consider joining them by donating $10 to break the silence against domestic violence by using my link in the description. Now let's start talking about theme parks. This is the great Sarah Says with an update about the spooky season at Universal. Take it away, Sarah.
Thanks, Rick. Bear with me, because I don't exactly have the voice of Orson Welles, but I had to talk about Halloween Horror Nights 2022 at Universal Orlando Resort. This is one of the most highly anticipated events each and every year in the theme park community. It runs selected dates from September 2nd until Halloween night on October 31st. But that doesn't really tell the entire story. During that time, it runs every Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and the only Wednesday it does not run is September 14th. Universal is going to give everyone ample opportunity to experience this special ticketed event. Tickets are now on sale and start at $73.99. According to Universal Orlando Resort, Halloween Horror Nights is not recommended for children under 13. This is definitely not the type of Halloween event you would get in more pixie dust-filled theme parks. Halloween Horror Nights features a total of 10 haunted houses, 5 scare zones, 2 live shows, themed food and drinks, many of the rides and attractions at Universal Studios Florida, and merchandise themed to the event. There is also a Halloween Horror Nights Behind the Screams, Unmasking the Horror Tour. This is a VIP experience during the daytime hours that gives guests a chance to see the haunted houses with the lights on for a change. There are tours for 3 or 6 hours. Don't worry about cramming the tour into your already busy park day, because theme park and/or event admission is not included, nor is it required to do the tour. Of course, date, number of houses, and availability have an impact on the price, but tours start at $79.99. Finally, for those of you who really want the blood red carpet rolled out for you, there is the Halloween Horror Nights RIP Tour. This tour provides VIP entry into the haunted houses in a guided walking tour. That VIP access is limited to once per house, and a separate event admission is required. These tours come with a hefty price tag starting at $249.99. Of course, we can also expect there to be a Halloween-themed tribute store at Universal Studios Florida in the lead-up to the big day. These tribute stores, whether they be for the holidays, Mardi Gras, or to celebrate something else at Universal, are always incredibly themed. They usually come with special snacks and all of the season-specific merchandise. Halloween Horror Nights at Universal Orlando Resort will run from September 2nd until Halloween night. Expect our very own Rick Doherty to try at least one night to experience it and give a full recap on the show. Speaking of Rick, I'm going to turn things back over to him. I'm Sarah Says, and this is Tall Guy Talks Travel.
Now I'm going to welcome Christina from Alaska to the show. Thanks for joining us, Christina.
Hi, Rick. How you doing?
I am doing well, but not as well as you're doing because you are still coming off that glow of being at Disneyland. Very, very recently you were there. So why don't you start by just telling me a little bit about how Disneyland is looking now? I haven't been since August of last year, and it was a whole different look to it. It was still quite limited capacity. The parks had only been open for about a month or so. Magic Key didn't even go on sale until the day we left. So it's looking a whole lot different now than it was then. So what were your vibes the first time going back to Disneyland post reopening?
So I'll start by saying I was really, really excited to go to Disneyland this time around. We hadn't been since 2016, but previous to that, it was our go-to park. We lived on the West Coast and in Hawaii for a long time. And so whenever we went to a Disney park, that's where we went up until we moved to Florida. And it's changed quite a bit since then. My brain was just spinning. You know, you get used to thinking that Magic Kingdom and Disneyland are pretty similar. You know, you're basically getting the same thing, but that's really not the case. There is so much more crammed into that smaller space at Disneyland. And as a dark ride lover, that was really one of the highlights for me. And two of my favorite rides, the Pirates and Thunder Mountain, are actually, in my opinion, a little bit better over at Disneyland. So that was even pretty great.
I think the only way I'm going to disagree with you is Pirates in Disneyland is much better, significantly better, not just a little bit better. It's like twice as long. It is so much better experience. You're in Blue Bayou at the beginning of the ride. That atmosphere is really
it's pretty
fun.
great. It's pretty great. But I my heart is in Florida, and so I try not to be too hard on Walt Disney World, but it really was spectacular. And I'm kicking myself a little bit that we didn't go around the same time that you went when the parks first reopened, because there really was something really special about when they were starting to get themselves up and running again, and the capacity was really low. I remember what that was like at Walt Disney World, and that was a pretty special time. But, you know, it was kind of complicated with the reservation system, and they weren't letting that many people in, and we were only going to be in California for a limited time. And I thought, oh gosh, if I buy tickets and then turn around, I can't get a reservation, then what am I going to do with these tickets? We'll be in Alaska in a week, and, you know, we'll be stuck. But this was still a good time. It was busier than I expected, especially given that I took my kid out of school at a non-spring break time. There were a lot of things down for refurbishment. So I really thought that it would be slow, but it was definitely busy. I think we wouldn't have had as good a time if we didn't purchase the Genie Plus for 2 of the 3 days. It's a hard pill to swallow. It really is. Don't get me wrong. Family of 3, it's a little bit easier to justify the cost. I love that it comes with the Photo Pass. So that was something really helpful. We would have bought Photo Pass probably for, it's hard to remember what the price was, but I think it was comparable to what we ended up paying for Disney Plus. So for Genie Plus. And so I think it was definitely worth it. And if you're a ride or die girl like me with no breaks and just go the whole time, you're going to get your money's worth for sure.
So that's interesting because here on the East Coast at Walt Disney World, we're hearing a lot of horror stories about Genie Plus, a lot of people having a hard time using it. Now, obviously, you're very familiar with the Disney apps, but trying to adjust to Genie Plus, was it easy? Were you having an easy time getting on rides? That's basically the main question.
Yes. So I was very nervous about that. And being the nerd that I am and being so familiar with the apps, I was able to go online and really understand how the app worked, what I could use it for that would be really helpful. I watched some YouTube videos on like how it would not be very helpful. I will say we didn't use the free Genie portion of the service at all because it was telling me nonsense things like, first thing in the park, I should sit down and go to the tiki room, which is not what we do with the first couple hours within opening. You don't sit and watch a show, that's very valuable park time. But I had seen that at Disneyland, it was pretty much availability immediately. Like if I wanted to go on Big Thunder Mountain, there would be availability within the next hour. Even on a busy Saturday, you were looking at maybe 2 hours later if you were getting into the afternoon times. Whereas when I was experimenting at Walt Disney World, some of the comeback times were at the end of the day. And I thought, well, how is that going to be helpful if maybe you plan to do some park hopping? You basically have to stay in one park all day, and it's just not financially reasonable. Say if you start out in a place like Epcot, which only has a couple rides that are even good on Genie Plus, right? So in a busier time, they have two of their big rides are on individual Lightning Lane. And don't get me started even on the nomenclature. Oh my goodness. I just call it Fast Pass because that's what it is. It's paid Fast Pass.
And if it's hard for somebody like you who pays attention as much as you pay attention and went in doing a ton of research going into Disneyland, I think sometimes we can get spoiled because we have all that information. And there are a lot of people who are flying blind. Maybe they do buy Genie Plus because they're talked into it. They think it's going to help them skip a lot of lines. But if you're not prepared to use it, it can be really, really difficult.
I agree. And it seems like you have to have a very well laid out strategy at Walt Disney World to make it worth the money. Meaning you have to be up at 7 a.m. booking that first pass, and whether or not you're going to be in the park, and then just every 2 hours be booking a new one throughout the whole day and hope that you can maybe eke out 5 or 6 rides, and still for $15, that's probably good. But I think for people who are familiar with the free Fast Pass service, they're used to it being a certain way. And to go in thinking, well, I'm going to have this paid service and it's going to work so much better, and then finding out the hard way that, that's maybe really not that good. But then at Disneyland, again, a totally different experience. You can't even buy the Genie Plus until after you've entered the park. So you can look at the tip board, you can see when the next return time is. And I also think that at Disneyland, was we did a full day without it. Our third day, we went without the Genie Plus, and I didn't really miss it, only because there's so many rides that aren't on the Genie Plus system. They're very fast moving lines, and because there's no one cutting in front of you, essentially, with a Fast Pass. So there's always something to do. We did a solid 12-hour day, and I think the longest thing we waited in was Roger Rabbit for some reason, because I think there were so many people with Genie Plus. So it's definitely worth the money, but you could definitely also have a pretty good day at Disneyland without it.
And I know you were looking at these things even though you had Genie Plus for those days, but what were the lines looking like at Disneyland? Were they noticeably longer than you have seen them in the past, or at least in the recent past?
No, I would say that they were right on par with what I remember Disneyland being like all those years ago when we would go in. Maybe just a little bit shorter. Of course, there are some things that are just like the Guardians ride over at California Adventure has a fairly low capacity and everybody wants to get on. So the lines were consistently longer there than they were even for the brand new Web Slingers ride in, down the way. So that was a little bit surprising to me. I was ready to wait hours for Web Slingers, and really the longest waits that I saw were at the Radiator Springs Racers and for the Guardians ride, which was fabulous, by the way. I've never been on that before. I was pretty excited.
So speaking of Avengers Campus, and then of course the Guardians of the Galaxy ride, what did you think about Avengers Campus? This was your first time seeing it. What was your experience?
So it was my first time seeing it. It was good. I enjoyed the shows. I will say that. I really thought Web Slingers was great. I love an interactive ride. Like Toy Story Mania is one of my favorites. I have to do it every time, as many times as we can. So this was sort of in the same vein. I liked a lot of the little Easter eggs around town. The test kitchen was okay, but as a whole, it definitely felt like the land was a little bit lacking. I don't know what the right word is. After seeing Galaxy's Edge and all the attention to detail that they put into that, where you're really transported, or even Cars Land. Cars Land is a marvel in itself, and that's a much older project. So to see them open Avengers Campus in a way I think just felt a little bit incomplete was a little bit disappointing. And I don't know that having the e-ticket attraction open would have made that much of a difference. It still just doesn't feel like I'm somewhere else. And that's definitely what you expect when you go into a Disneyland. When you walk into Adventureland, you're clearly in a different place than when you were in Fantasyland.
I think one thing that definitely hurts Avengers Campus is it's a very, very small footprint. It is not a lot of space. They're not working with the same type of space they were working with at Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. But I understand what you're saying, and I'm not a Marvel fan. I've only seen a few of the movies. I'm not somebody who really pays all that much attention to Marvel. But I did enjoy it as somebody who's more of a casual Marvel fan. I enjoyed seeing the characters. The Wakanda show is really, really cool. The Spider-Man stunt show is really fun.
Oh, yeah.
So I actually think I might have liked it more as a casual Marvel fan than a lot of people who are bigger Marvel fans, because I wasn't expecting to see anything in particular, so there was no way I was going to be let down for not seeing something.
I could see that. I could definitely see that. And I'm definitely more like you. I am on the outskirts. I've seen all the movies, though. I've seen all the movies, but I wouldn't say that I'm like deep into the Marvel multiverse or anything. It's and I was able to find a few little Easter eggs that I thought were very interesting. Like there's a place where the gamma radiation is leaking out of a building and the tree is green, you know, like nice little touches like that. And you're right, I shouldn't be so hard on it because they did have a very small footprint to work with. And they incorporated something that was already there, which I think was probably very tricky. But at the same time, I find myself explaining to my family, oh, so what we're seeing here is that this is an old Stark Enterprises building that has been taken over for Avengers Campus. But there's nowhere in the land that explains that to you. I only know that because I've done all the research, and maybe a regular Marvel nerd would have done that too. But I look at it through the lens of a Disney Parks fan, and I just feel like it's not done yet. And, you know, it may not be. They may have a little bit more work to do to bring it up to par.
So unless you have tons of money, the one thing that I usually suggest is staying off property at Disneyland. And you did that. Where did you stay? And did you find that was the right decision to make?
You know, I could talk all day about how much I enjoyed our stay at the Howard Johnson on Harbor Boulevard. That Howard Johnson, we've stayed there probably 3 or 4 times over the years. And I've tried to make the case that we should stay at the Disneyland Hotel or at the Grand Californian. But as a place to sleep, which is really all we would use the room for, I just can't justify the cost. It's super neat that you can walk directly into California Adventure from the Grand Californian. That is a huge, huge perk. I love that. But for about a quarter of the price, we walked 8 minutes from the hotel to the front gates. If I forgot something, I could go back. And I try to compare that to Walt Disney World. To have an 8-minute walk into the park, I don't even think I could do that if we stayed at any of the deluxe resorts on the monorail loop. I don't think you could get any closer. And the rooms have been remodeled recently at the Hojo. Very comfortable, very large. I had a view of Disneyland from my balcony. We paid a little bit more, and I was able to wake up to the Matterhorn in the morning and Space Mountain. Clear, perfect views. If Disneyland had fireworks while we were there, they were canceled because of wind. I guess. We would have been able to see them from our room. So that's pretty spectacular. I know some people prefer things that are directly across the street from the park. We've stayed at the Best Western and at, I can't think of what the other one is, but there's another small motel style place right across the street that we've stayed at. And the noise is just too much. The motel style puts you, right out to Harbor Boulevard, and it's noisy all hours of the day and night. So in our hotel room, I would open the patio door and it was loud, being very close to the freeway, and then you close it and it was almost silent. It was great. I think the only thing that I complained about a little bit was silly things like I wish there was an additional charging outlet on the nightstand. There was only one plug on that side of the bed, and now my daughter has her own device, so everybody's plugged in but me. And then the bathroom light turned on automatically, which was a problem when you've got a kid trying to sleep and the adults are still awake. Bathroom light lights up the whole room. But aside from that, it was a perfect stay. If you have a little one, there's a really great splash pad out front, little slides, a pool. Only downside there was COVID protocols. They were having you do a reservation system for your time at the pool. So that was a little bit complicated because how do you know 3 weeks in advance what time you want to be at the pool?
So when we were there, we stayed at the Portofino about a block away, sort of behind Disney's California Adventure. And I think somebody who's used to going to Walt Disney World who hasn't been to Disneyland has no idea how these off-property hotels are so close to the parks. We maybe had a little longer walk than you had to get there, but we went right by a convenience store. So we were able to get sodas and waters for $1.50 or $2 instead of $4.50, $5 inside the park. And we were able to do that every morning. We were able to get our drinks for a cheaper price, walk into Disneyland. We could walk back fairly easily. It really is one of my favorite things about Disneyland compared to Walt Disney World. I've even been talking with people a lot lately how I just don't go to Magic Kingdom anymore because it's so hard to get there. Like, I rarely
I
ever
agree
go.
with you there. That's a very sad thing to say, but I'm with you. We would go there probably the least. But I mean, that's saying a lot. We're going almost every week. So if I was only going to Magic Kingdom once a month, that's still a lot more than other people are going.
I understand because it sounds spoiled. And I agree with you. Maybe I do go once a month or once every other month, but it still does feel like it's so hard to get there. And Disneyland is so much more accessible in that way.
Yes. It's very funny to me because the first time I ever went to Disneyland, it was one of the things that I thought was weird and bad about the Disneyland resort because I grew up in Florida. So whenever we went to Disney, we went to Disney World, and it was truly like entering another world. All the street signs are a different color. You don't see any tall buildings. There's no traffic. Everything is just Disney. And there's really, I don't think I would stay off property at Walt Disney World. I am that spoiled. I have stayed at the Disney Springs hotels before. Right after the COVID lockdown, they were doing some really good specials at the DoubleTree specifically. We were staying at the DoubleTree for under $99 a night with parking and resort fees included. And that hotel normally would have been in the $250, $300 range. So we stayed there quite a few times. Easy to do when you're driving in and you have your car. But it's funny now, I find that the things that I didn't like about Disneyland are things that I really like now. Like you were saying, you passed a convenience store. Well, from the Howard Johnson, we passed Panera Bread every morning. So my husband's a coffee drinker, so he'd get a cup of coffee. My daughter would get a scone, whatever. And you could use the mobile order on your phone. So it's just ready when you get there. There's no stopping. And I found that to be a very convenient feature. Park hopping, that's another thing that's mind blowing. We almost never park hopped at Walt Disney World, almost never. To me, it was not worth the time that it took to get to one park to another. And that's whether we were staying for like a long weekend or just for the night or even just driving in for the day. I almost never park hopped. Yeah, I mean, at a minimum, it takes an hour to get from one place to another. So unless you're on a limited ticket, you're on a 2-day ticket and you're trying to cram 4 days in, I wouldn't recommend it to anybody.
That is one of the best aspects of Disneyland as well. You just walk right across the Esplanade and you're in Disney's California Adventure. You can be looking at wait times on the app and decide you want to go to another park because maybe it's easier to hop back over to Disneyland and ride something with a short wait than going further back into California Adventure.
Absolutely. And then the first day we had our Genie, our start day was in Disneyland, but I was really wanting to go on that Guardians ride. And I knew one of the shortcomings of Genie Plus is that you can only use one lightning lane per ride per day. And I knew I was going to want to ride it more than once. And the wait times that day were in the hour and a half to almost 2 hours at some point zone, even into the evening. So that, unless they were elevating the weights to kick people out, but that's another story. But we were able to just say, oh, there's a lightning lane within the next hour across the way. Let's go real quick. Just we'll put our blinders on and we won't look at any other part of Avengers Campus. We'll just go ride that ride and then get back. And that's exactly what we did. So we were able to ride that one on 2 different days. We actually had a multiple experience too, which is like getting a Willy Wonka golden ticket. If you get a multiple experience, then you can use it on any one of the lightning lanes, and again and again on Guardians is the way to go, I think.
Interesting. I'm surprised you liked that ride that much, and that's really cool. I'm glad that you liked the re-theme. Were you a big Tower of Terror fan, or do you actually like this more than Tower of Terror?
So I'm definitely a Tower of Terror purist. I will say I like Tower of Terror more, and it's a very special ride to me because I hate it as much as I love it, if that makes sense. Like every single time I'm terrified going through the line. When we're getting on the ride, I'm white knuckles on the handles, like ready to scream. And in fact, I think the first time we rode the Guardians ride, I must have screamed in my husband's ear the entire time. He's like, calm down, it's gonna be okay. But I will be the first one in line again, over and over again. Another one that's same but different, Space Mountain. Spent a lot of time telling myself that they're basically the same ride, and they are definitely not. The ride is so much smoother. I mean, I don't know that the ride itself is longer or better in some way, but the refurbishment they did a few years back on that track was worth its weight in gold, because I almost never rode Space Mountain in Florida because I would have a backache afterwards or a headache from being shook around so much. And this was just fun.
It is definitely a ride that is better at Disneyland than at Walt Disney World, because it destroys your back here on the East Coast. And as somebody who's as tall as I am, that is just
right.
A big old problem.
Yeah, I mean, it's a small little capsule that they're trying to shove people in. And my husband's not a big guy, but he always has trouble getting in there. He's very uncomfortable with where the lap bar sits. He's like, once a trip is good for me, and he's totally fine if we skip it. So if the wait is anything over a half an hour when we're on it, it's just a pass for him all around. And after a while, after riding it a bunch at Walt Disney World, I was kind of feeling the same. If my kid was really begging me, then all right, fine, we'll go on Space Mountain. But there have been lots of times where he just sit it out.
So you had mentioned that you were maybe lukewarm on Pym Test Kitchen, but what were some of your other dining experiences? Did you have any that were really a step up for you, or were you just running quick service? Did you have some disappointments? What was it like?
We always have big dreams. We're going to eat at this restaurant, that restaurant. But once we got there, I was just so excited to be there and doing the rides and eating the treats. I have a hard time sitting down and relaxing at a restaurant because I just feel the time ticking away. Especially at the time that we went, being slightly off season, the park was closing at 9. So you really weren't getting the full days. Although, to be honest, I don't know. I'm kind of old now. I don't know if I could do an 11 o'clock midnight closing anymore and then get up first thing in the morning and do it all over again. 12-hour days are good for me. We did eat one sit-down restaurant in downtown Disney the night before we started. We went to the Jazz Kitchen, which was fantastic. It was expensive, but it was worth it. It was good sized portions, and I'm never as happy as I am when I have a good meal. So I would highly, highly recommend that one to anyone. Only downside was I was too stuffed to get ice cream at Salt and Straw, which is something that I had been looking forward to for a while. But you know what? It's ice cream. It'll be there next time we go. It'll be all right. But as far as in the parks go, we were quick service the whole time, as quick as possible. The panini I had at Pim's Test Kitchen was pretty good. You know, maybe I was a little bit hard on it. It's nothing spectacular, but it was good. The setup inside is really neat. My daughter really loved watching the pretzels coming out of the machine. Is it going to be small? Is it going to be giant? She thought that was really cool. We didn't have any alcohol. I have a rule. I don't like drinking out in the sun, so that we didn't do any $15 Pim's Test Kitchen drinks. save some money for churros, because there are churro carts everywhere. And let's see, where else did we eat? That was pretty good. We had an okay meal at the Pacific Wharf. I don't recall the name of it's like a Chinese food restaurant. It was okay. We ate at Zocalo, I'm not exactly sure how you pronounce that, in Disneyland. That was always very good. That's always one of our go-tos. Mexican food makes everybody happy.
So I want to cycle back to Ralph Brennan's Jazz Kitchen, because we actually ate there one of our days when we were there in August, and it really, really surprised me how good it was there. I got a vegetarian meal. Everybody who was with me got some sort of meat meal, so we got to see a bunch of different items because there were 4 of us at the table, and boy, that food was really, really good. The atmosphere was great. Good. The service was fantastic.
Agree. All around, agree. We did wait quite a while, which was the downside. I wish I hadn't been quite so hungry, but it was, the service was really good once we got in there. I felt like we were lucky to get a nice patio table out front. And although it was a little chilly in the evening, they had they had the nice heat lamps. You'd think coming from Alaska that we would never be cold, but I really needed some warm weather. So I'm glad we had a lot of that at Disneyland.
So you made mention of living in Alaska now. You just moved from Florida last year. So we talked about Disneyland a lot, but right before I let you go, I want to talk about, what are you missing at Walt Disney World? What are you missing from the Orlando theme parks? Because I know there's at least one thing that's not in Walt Disney World that you're missing.
What? I don't know what you mean. Yeah, I miss Disney a lot in Florida, and Disneyland was great. I had a wonderful time, and it's definitely different enough that it satisfied the Disney need, and it had a lot of things in it that I hadn't done before. Oh, we didn't even get to talk about the new Snow White ride. That retheme was fantastic, beautiful. I could have ridden that again and again. So much better than the Scary Adventure. My kid was so scared of that ride the last time we went on, so that was fantastic. But Florida, my heart is there. My heart is there. I miss Epcot with every fiber of me. And I got to keep remembering that Epcot has a big giant hole in the middle of it and walls everywhere, and the cultural reps aren't back yet. And so it's definitely still lacking. And if I just wait a little bit longer, it'll be hopefully close to being its former glory and not just a festival space. I'm looking forward to that the most. And then, of course, over at Universal Studios, I really miss Velocicoaster. Really miss the Velocicoaster. She's like my favorite ride, I think. And also the motorbike adventure. Hagrid's Motorbike Adventure, such a fun ride. So we were annual pass holders just for the last 6 months of our time in Florida. And I really liked it, I think, more than I thought I did, even at the time. Like, well, it's not Disney. Yeah, it's not Disney. It's definitely something different, but it's special in its own way. And it's really coming up in the world, I think, from what it used to be. It's a world-class theme park now, especially with Harry Potter World. What they've done there is just spectacular.
Absolutely. And when you were talking about Epcot and all of the construction that's going on there now, we're getting ready for the Guardians of the Galaxy roller coaster to be opening. Hopefully they're getting closer and closer on the Moana attraction. Hopefully we're at least getting closer to having a little more in the front of the park that is manageable, because right now I spend most of my time already in World Showcase, so it's not a huge distraction for me, but even just going from the parking lot to get back to World Showcase can be a real pain right now. So it definitely is not the Epcot that you remember yet. So hopefully we'll get there soon, and then we can get you back to Florida so you can spend some time at Epcot.
Yeah, well, I keep imagining this trip because I am coming soon. I don't know when it's going to be, but I'm planning a trip in my mind, and the time I need to spend in Florida keeps getting longer and longer because I'm like, well, I need at least 3 days at Universal, and we're going to need a couple days in between to enjoy the pool because the resorts at Universal are really great, really, really great. Cabana Bay being one of my favorites. I wish though that they had the same kind of perks at least available for purchase that the other hotels do with the quick queue. What can you do? Because the quick queue per person is so expensive that it's not realistic, I don't think. But if you're staying at one of their deluxe resorts, having it included, that's a fantastic benefit and worth the money. So when you compare that apples to apples with what you get at a deluxe resort at Disney World, I think Disney comes up a little bit short.
The last time we stayed on property, it actually was at Cabana Bay at Universal Orlando Resort, and they made a mistake and gave us free express pass because they made the mistake. But it happened to be the first day of Mardi Gras, so we still waited even in express pass 20, 30 minutes for every ride we did. It was just that crowded of a day. But we wouldn't have ridden anything if we didn't have express pass, so I guess it was still pretty nice. Yeah, like you said, the deluxe resorts having the free express pass with them, that is a big thing at Universal. So, Christina, thank you so much for joining us. This was a great conversation. It's nice to see you. I haven't seen you in such a long time because you're basically on the other end of the world. So thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. It was really good to talk to you, and hopefully you'll be doing it in person again soon.
This has been episode 61 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Please, if you are able, consider donating $1 per mile to break the silence against domestic violence in honor of my upcoming run this Sunday at the Tower of Terror 10-miler at Walt Disney World. There's a link in the description, and your $10 donation will really make a difference for survivors of domestic violence. You can also go and see the pinned tweet at TGTT Podcast. The link is there as well, and of course, we would really appreciate if you shared it. If we continue with our momentum, we can get 100 people to give $10 each by Sunday. That is my current goal. With the amount of people who listen to the show, we should be able to do that. As I said, the link is in the description or twitter.com/TGTT Podcast. Next week, Sarah Says will be back on the show as we talk about a couple of newer Disney movies, and we even have some fun speculating how they could be incorporated into the theme parks. That will be Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty next Thursday. Until then, have a great week.